friends. How are you? I feel like I haven't seen you in such a long time. I hope you've been following along with everybody's wonderful books. Here, as you can see, it's the holiday season. So I have two books that we're going to read today. One is a book about fall. It's a very silly book about a squirrel who's losing his leaves. And the other one is a little bit of a Christmas book. So the first book that I'm going to read is called The Leaf Thief. And it was written by Alice Heming, and the pictures were done by Nicola Slater. So remember, the author writes the words and the illustrator does the pictures. The Leaf Thief. What a wonderful time of year. I am snug in my nest with a belly full of hazelnuts, and the sun is shining through my leafy canopy. Such lovely colors: red, gold, orange, red, gold, orange, red, gold. Wait a minute, one of my leaves is missing. Where is it? It's not here. It's not here. Can you see the squirrel looking around for all of his leaves? Bird! What is the matter? Someone stole my leaf. What do you think happened to squirrels' leaves? Your leaf? Yes, one of my leaves is missing. My leaf looks like that one, the one Mouse has. That is not your leaf, squirrel. But how can you be sure? Mouse! Mouse! Did you steal my leaf? No, this is my boat. Can you see the mouse floating around in that puddle on a leaf, using it as a boat? See, squirrel? It's perfectly normal to lose a leaf or two this time of year, okay? Okay, bird, thanks. See you tomorrow. What do you think's gonna happen next? If he lost one leaf, it's fall. How do you think the squirrel's about to react? The next morning. Oh no, this is bad. Bird! What is the matter this time? More leaves have been stolen. Excuse me, woodpecker, are those my leaves? Ooh, he's just accusing everybody, isn't he? No, these are my leaves, squirrel. I spent ages collecting them. Look at, woodpecker's making a very pretty canopy with his leaves. No one is taking your leaves, squirrel. This is what happened last year, remember? Maybe. Why don't you go back to your nest and try to relax? Okay, thanks, bird. Try to relax. Breathe in, breathe out, just relax. The squirrel looked very relaxed right there. I don't think he does. What do you think's gonna happen? The following morning. This is a disaster! Bird! Bird! Where are you, bird? I am here, squirrel. Sounds like bird's kind of frustrated with squirrel. What do you think? Wait a minute. Are you the leaf thief? Look at all the leaves that bird has. No, squirrel, I am not the leaf thief. I will show you the leaf thief. Where are they? Because I've got a few things I'd like to say to them. Look around you. The leaf thief is everywhere, shaking the trees and rustling the leaves. It even takes your hat. Do you see the leaf thief, squirrel? What do you see that's blowing all these leaves around? Can you see? It's the wind, right? The wind is taking all the leaves right off the trees and even blowing Mouse's hat right off his head. So the leaf thief is the wind. The only leaf thief is the wind? That happens every year in autumn, every year. The leaves change color and the wind blows them away. They'll grow back again in the spring. Now, I'm going home. Please do not disturb me again. It was just the wind. The leaves change color and the wind blows them away, of course. No leaf thief at all. Silly me. I am going to sleep well tonight. The next morning. Bird! Someone has stolen the grass! Oh, look it snowed outside. So now Mouse thinks someone stole the grass instead of all of his leaves. He's so silly. I thought this book was really cute. I hope you liked it. So what do you think of that? So my next book is called Grumpy Monkey. Oh no, Christmas. I'm sure some of you have read some of the Grumpy Monkey books before. So you know about Jim Pansy, which isn't that a great name for a character? Jim Pansy instead of Chimpanzee. So creative. So this book is called Grumpy Monkey, Oh No, Christmas, by Suzanne Lang. That means Suzanne wrote the words, and illustrated by Max Lang. So Max made all the pictures. You ready? I love these Grumpy Monkey books. We think they're real funny in my house. It was a drizzly December day, just as it had been all week. Jim Pansy wasn't in the mood to celebrate. Can't it be nice for one stinking day? Jim sighed and set out in the wet in search of breakfast. But what he found was a banana, and it was green. Figures, said Jim, and he tossed the banana aside. Looks like Jim's already in a bad mood, doesn't it? Are you going to eat this? Asked his neighbor Norman. No, said Jim, it's not ripe. It'll ripen in your stomach, said Norman. You didn't even peel it, Jim said. The peel's where all the vitamins are, said Norman. Don't we all know people like that? My children eat the peels of kiwis. And they're like, yeah, it's all the good stuff, Mom. I'm like, huh, is it? I don't think that's true, said Water Buffalo from beneath the tree. Who cares if it's true, said Oxpecker. It's almost Christmas. And everyone knows green bananas are so much more Christmassy than yellow ones because green is a Christmas color. I'm so excited for Christmas. The weather stinks. The banana stinks. What's there to celebrate when everything stinks, snapped Jim. Nothing to celebrate? Oxpecker couldn't believe it. But it's such a magical time of year. There are presents and visiting relatives and decorations. Oh, no, not decorations, said Water Buffalo. Of course, decorations, chirped Oxpecker as she wrapped some berries around Water Buffalo's horns. Did you see that? She put berries on his horns. Does he look very happy about it? Can you see him like side-eyeing her? Decorations help spread Christmas cheer. See, Jim, now don't you feel like celebrating? No, said Jim, and he stomped away. Jim is a grumpy monkey, isn't he? Jim was so busy stomping, he didn't notice Marabou. Why are you stomping around, Jim? Asked Marabou. You should celebrate. It's such a magical time of year. Celebrate? Me, I don't feel like celebrating, said Jim. Oof. Maybe a song will help. Fa la 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 la, said Jim, and he held his ears and stomped on. Was that very nice? It sounded kind of rude, if you ask me. And he stomped on right into a puddle of mud. Hooray, Jim! You're just in time to enjoy some of our holiday treats, croaked Frog. What kind of treats you think frogs use? Nothing makes you want to celebrate like a little fly pot pie. Am I right? Said Bullfrog. Fly pot pie? Do you want to eat fly pot pie? You think Jim Pansy wants to eat fly pot pie? I'm putting my money on no. Celebrate? Me? I don't feel like celebrating, said Jim, looking at him shoving the pie back at the frogs. Everyone wanted Jim to enjoy this magical time of year. You should wrap presents. Ooh, and put them under the tree. You should make a card for your mom. Don't forget your dad. You should take a long winter's nap. You should light 7 candles, or 9. You should reflect quietly. You should eat sugar plums. You should do something nice for someone else. Wasn't that nice of all of his friends to suggest some nice ways to celebrate the holidays? But Jim didn't feel like doing any of that. Why aren't you celebrating, Jim? Asked the others. It's such a magical time of year. The bananas aren't ripe, I'm soaked and covered in mud. The fly is driving me crazy, and you're all giving me a headache. How can I celebrate when everything stinks? And he stormed off. Poor Jim. Look at him leaving behind his friends there who were trying to be so nice to him. Jim tried to ignore all the holiday celebrations. Can you see him sitting in the tree with the fly buzzing around his head? That's still bothering him. He couldn't ignore the rumbling in his tummy. Maybe Norman's right. Maybe the banana will ripen in my stomach. He peeled a green banana and ate it. Ow, 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 Norman wasn't right. Norman wasn't right about what? Asked Norman. About the bananas, said Jim, and now my stomach hurts and I still have a headache and I'm muddy and wet. And come to think of it, I'm cold too. Not to mention, the fly won't leave me alone. How can anyone celebrate when everything stinks? Sounds like you could use some tea, said Norman. Tea, said Jim. I don't like tea. Have you ever tried it? Asked Norman. No, said Jim. Maybe. Give it a try, suggested Norman. What do you think? Do your parents ever say that to you? Maybe you should just try it, and maybe you'll like it. It's kind of good advice. Jim took a sip of the tea. It warmed him all the way to his tummy. In fact, it started to make his tummy feel better. It's made with mint leaves that grow right here. Pretty nice, huh? Said Norman. never noticed the mint leaves, said Jim. They do a good job of blending in, said Norman. So look, can you see all the mint leaves are all blended in with the green trees, the green leaves? I can get that for you, said Chameleon. Snap, and see, look at Chameleon, who's also hiding in the green trees, and you can't really see him. Pop that fly right away from from Chimpanzee's face. Thanks, said Jim. I guess there are a lot of things I haven't noticed. It can be hard to notice things when you've got a lot of complaints, said Norman. Jim looked around. He noticed how pretty the raindrops looked on the leaves, and that the holiday tree made a pretty good umbrella, and that he was surrounded by loved ones. Taking time to notice the good things can make your problems seem smaller, said Norman. Jim agreed. Ooh, sounds like Jim's learning a little lesson here. And that was a reason to celebrate. So look at them all holding hands, standing around the tree. Sounds like Chimpanzee might have a nicer Christmas than he thought he was going to have. Well, that is all for me. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, no matter what you celebrate. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye.
Hi, I'm Steve Walker, usually known as Grandpa, which I prefer. I have a couple of stories for you today. The first one is called The Toy Maker. It was originally written by Gerda Thelen, and it was illustrated by Fritz Kuchenthal. This dates back to 1935, so it's actually slightly older than I am, but it's a nice story. It's going to talk about how to change a tree into a toy, and it'll talk about some of the tools. So if you have someone in your family who's about my age, they probably have a lot of these interesting tools to use, and they can show them to you. So let's get started. Here we are deep in the pine woods. The forester is showing the lumberman the trees which are for sale. So that the woodcutters will know which trees to cut, a workman paints a white ring around their trunks. After a few days, the woodcutters arrive with large cross-cut saws and very sharp axes. They saw down the trees which are the white rings on. The branches and twigs are chopped off at once and neatly piled. These will be sold later. The logs are then taken to the sawmill on a large wagon that is pulled by 2 strong horses. At the sawmill, the bark is stripped from the logs, and the logs are then cut into boards. Some of the boards are thick and some are thin. They are now ready to be sold to the carpenter. He buys both kinds. Back in his own workshop, the carpenter takes a tool called a handsaw and cuts the large boards into small ones. Some are cut into long strips. When the boards are cut into the proper size, they are polished very smooth with another sharp tool called a plane, so there will be no rough edges. The toy maker, who wants to make a toy village, now comes to buy some of these boards from the carpenter. He buys 2 of the long strips. The top of these have been pointed by the carpenter with his plane. The toy maker also buys 1 thin, flat board. In his workshop, the toy maker cuts the long strips into many smaller pieces. For this, he uses a foxtooth saw. When they are cut, they look like houses, but they still have rough edges and are not all straight. The toy maker must straighten the pieces and must smooth the edges. With a sharp tool called a rasp, the crooked sides are straightened out. With another tool called a file, the edges are made smooth so there will be no splinters. The houses are now quite ready, but they all look alike. The toy maker wishes to have a schoolhouse and a church in the toy village. So, with his brush and some hot glue, the toy maker glues a high steeple on one of the long houses. This will be the village church. On the roof of another house, he glues a small tower. This will be the schoolhouse. The houses that are glued in this way must be put into a tight wooden clamp until the glue is dry. So that none of the houses of the village will get lost, the toy maker next builds a chest. With a queer-looking tool called a coping saw, He saws the thin board into 6 pieces of the proper size. The smooth pieces are nailed together with a hammer and nails. The cover of the chest is fastened on with 2 hinges. Now the glue is dry, so the toymaker takes the houses from the clamp and polishes them smooth with sandpaper. This takes off all the drops of glue and also all the splinters. The toymaker then paints these houses different colors. The toymaker also makes some tiny trees with red trunks. And when he is almost through, he paints the chest red and green. The finished, brightly colored toy village is then carried to the toy shop. There the toy village is at once put into the show window. Many boys and girls admire it and wish they might get it for a Christmas present. One mother, who has twins, a boy and a girl, helps Santa Claus fill his orders and buys the toy village. She also buys a small Christmas tree. She carries both of them home with her. On Christmas Day, the twins shout for joy when they find that Santa Claus has left them the toy village. What fun they have building the new bright village under their Christmas tree. So I have another story here. If you haven't heard this one, you really have to. It's absolutely a classic. It was written about 125 years ago when I was quite young. This is the tale of Peter Rabbit. It's written by Beatrix Potter. And once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but do not go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there, and he was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out," she said. Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was a very naughty rabbit, ran straight away, guess where, into Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First he ate some lettuces, and then some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, who should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, and I think he might have got away altogether if he had not, unfortunately, run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons. It was quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. and he rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden under a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Achoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. He tried to put his foot on Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter, so he went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp from sitting in that can. After a while, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in the wall, but it was locked and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she couldn't answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he came more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hose. Scratch, 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 scratch. Peter scuttled underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, but beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter didn't care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes to make a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired, he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I'm sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed, made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter, 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. But Floppy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jane Rabbit, and welcome to the Lunenburg Storytime. I have a few books I want to read to you today. And the first one is called Little Red Sleigh. When I was a child, these were the sleighs that we had, or sleds, I guess they called them. And they were a lot of fun. They steered, I have lots of wonderful memories of using that sled. Anyway, so it's called Little Red Sleigh, and the author is Aaron Gwendelsberg, and the pictures, the illustrator is Elizaveta Tretakova. The hardest part of this book is the name of the author and the illustrator. Anyway, in a quiet corner of a cozy Christmas shop, there was a little red sleigh, as bright as Christmas morning. She wasn't very big, and she wasn't very fast, and she was very young for a sleigh. But deep down inside her strong, sweet heart, Little Red had a big dream. She longed to become Santa's big red sleigh. Everyone in the shop told Little Red that her dream would never come true. It was impossible. She was too small, too slow, and much too young. She couldn't fly, they said, so how could she possibly be Santa's sleigh? Little Red wondered if these things might be true. Was she too small, too slow, too young? But she believed deep in her heart she could fly. Through the sky, she would soar like a bird. She could learn anything. She could be anything. And this Christmas, she was going to prove it. She would travel to the top of the world, find Santa Claus, and show everyone what she was made of. So, as winter fell, Little Red went north. Her journey was very difficult. She dragged herself through mud and grime. She crossed rickety bridges and braved treacherous paths. Soon she started to worry she wouldn't make it to the North Pole before Christmas. Then she found some train tracks. "Where are you headed?" asked a friendly train. "The North Pole," said Little Red. "Off to see the big man, huh? Well, climb aboard," puffed Train. Little Red hopped onto the train, and they chugged quickly down the line. "You have so many cars," Little Red said. "I wish I were as big and fast as you." "I wasn't always so big or so fast," said Train. "When I started out, I had just 2 stock cars. I worked up and down these tracks for a long time before they gave me a 3rd. Then I earned a 4th and a 5th, and so on." By the way, stock cars are cars where farm animals travel in. "Oh, I can't wait to be as big as you," said Little Red. Train laughed. "Be patient, little sleigh. Life builds up one car at a time." As they steamed north, the ground gradually changed from softly rolling hills to vast icy mountains. After many, many miles, Train slowed down and stopped at a station. "This is as far as I go," he said, "but over that ledge you'll find Yellow Truck, who can help you go farther." "Oh, thank you," said Little Red. As she slid over the hill, she saw a bright yellow truck loaded with Christmas trees. "Hello," said Little Red Sleigh. "Can you show me the way to the North Pole?" "Happy to," Yellow Truck said. "I'm heading that way myself to deliver these Christmas trees to the big man. Hop on." I'm sure you know that the big man is Santa Claus. In the truck, Little Red snuggled between trees, surrounded by the sweet scent of pine. Yellow Truck drove down a narrow road, rounding curves, dodging holes, and gliding smoothly over bumps. "Wow," said Little Red. "I wish I could drive like you do." "Well now," Yellow Truck said, "I wasn't always so. Used to be no one thought I could make deliveries. Then one winter I took a load of trees up north. It was just a few, But the next time I got more trees, then more and more. Life seems to build up one tree at a time. That afternoon, snow began to fall. Ice covered the roads. Yellow Truck's tires slipped and slid. His windshield wipers ran faster and faster as the snow fell harder and harder. "We have to pull over," hollered Yellow Truck. Little Red could barely hear him through the whipping wind. She closed her eyes and held tight. She feared that if she flew off, she would be lost. Then she would never find the North Pole. When they stopped, Little Red carefully opened her eyes. Snow was still swirling, but through it she saw lights twinkling, red, green, blue, and white. Was this the North Pole? Had they finally made it? "Do you see Santa Claus?" asked Little Red. She strained her eyes but could see nothing through the blur of falling snow. "I'm sorry," said Yellow Truck. "We didn't make it to the North Pole. We're going to have to stay here until the storm lets up." Little Red nestled deep into the bed of the Christmas trees, thankful for the shelter. But as she watched the snow pile up and up, her heart felt heavy. She'd come so far, and it was nearly Christmas. How would she ever get to the North Pole now? Little Red fell asleep, sniffling and wishing for Santa. In the morning, the sun rose high and bright. The storm was over. "Happy Christmas Eve," Little Red said. "Will we get moving soon to deliver the trees in time?" "Afraid not," said Yellow Truck. "My tires are stuck tight. I can't go anywhere today, but you should take a look at the town. I'll keep an eye on you from here. You never know what you'll find when you look around someplace new." Little Red thanked Yellow Truck and slid off the trees, out of the back and down the street. She hadn't gone very far when a pair of mittened hands suddenly picked her up. Oh, wow, a sleigh! A little girl in a purple parka hugged Little Red to her chest and held on tightly as she ran down the street and up to the top of the hill. The girl sat on Little Red, and then Little Red was just the right size for the little girl. Together, they flew down the hill again and again, sledding through the snow. Soon, other children joined in. Little Red played all day, helping each child soar through the air, watching their faces light up with joy. "This is what it feels like to fly. I'm doing it," said Little Red, her heart bursting with pride. At supper time, the girl in the purple parka brought Little Red back home. When Little Red closed her eyes that night at the end of Christmas Eve, she felt like she was still flying. The next day, on Christmas morning, Little Red woke up and sighed. She hadn't made it to the North Pole. She hadn't met Santa Claus, and now it was too late. Little Red was so disappointed, she started to cry. But then she noticed a small red envelope tucked beside her. It was addressed to her, and it said, "Little Red Sleigh." And the letter said, "Dear Little Red, Christmas is a time for giving. Each year I deliver treasures to children around the world, hoping to bring them joy. But sometimes I need a little help. Yesterday you delivered Christmas joy to many children. Thank you so much. You made each of those children very happy, and you did it just by being yourself. You are a very special sleigh indeed. I could really use someone like you up here in the North Pole. As a special thank you, you are cordially invited to visit me in the North Pole next year as we prepare for the holiday. Merry Christmas. Love, Santa Claus. Little Red couldn't believe her eyes. The North Pole with Santa Claus? Her dream had come true. Just then, the little girl in the purple parka bounded down the stairs. Little Red was ready. At last, she understood what she was meant to do. She would build her life up, spreading joy one child at a time. And Merry Christmas. There's a picture of Santa in his sleigh. Okay, so the second book that I have that I wanted to read to you, the name of it was Dr. DeSoto, and the author is William Stegg. He's also the illustrator. And this book was one that I used to read to my boys, and I think they liked it, but I don't think they liked it as much as I did. So I found it the other day, and I was like, I have to get that book. And so I gave it one to my grandchildren, and I kept one for myself because I like it so much. Anyway, Dr. DeSoto, the dentist, did very good work. So he had no end of patients. Those close to his own size, moles, chipmunks, etc., sat in the regular dentist's chair. Larger animals sat on the floor, while Dr. DeSoto stood on a ladder. For extra large animals, he had a special room. There, Dr. DeSoto was hoisted up to the patient's mouth by his assistant, who also happened to be his wife. They have a whole pulley system to get him up there. Dr. DeSoto was especially popular with the big animals. He was able to work inside their mouths wearing rubbers to keep his feet dry, and his fingers were so delicate and his drill so dainty they could hardly feel any pain. Being a mouse, he refused to treat animals dangerous to mice, and it said so on his sign. When the doorbell rang, he and his wife would look out the window. They wouldn't admit even the most timid-looking cat. And the sign said, Dr. DeSoto, dentist, cats and other dangerous animals not accepted for treatment. One day, when they looked out, they saw a well-dressed fox with a flannel bandage around his jaw. I cannot treat you, sir, Dr. DeSoto shouted. Sir, haven't you read my sign? Please, the fox wailed, have mercy, I'm suffering. And he wept so bitterly it was pitiful to see. Just a moment, said Dr. DeSoto. That poor fox, he whispered to his wife. What shall we do? Let's risk it, said Mrs. DeSoto. She pressed the buzzer and let the fox in. He was up the stairs in a flash. Bless your little hearts, he cried, falling to his knees. I beg you, do something. My tooth is killing me. Sit on the floor, sir, said Dr. DeSoto, and remove the bandage, please. Dr. DeSoto climbed up the ladder and bravely entered the fox's mouth. Oh, wow, he gasped. The fox had a rotten bicuspid and unusually bad breath. This tooth will have to come out, Dr. DeSoto announced, but we can make you a new one. Just stop the pain, whimpered the fox, wiping some tears away. Despite his misery, he realized he had a tasty little morsel in his mouth, and his jaw began to quiver. Keep open, yelled Dr. DeSoto. Wide open, yelled his wife. I'm giving you gas now, said Dr. DeSoto. You won't feel a thing when I yank that tooth. Soon the fox was in dreamland. Yummy, he mumbled. How I love them raw, with just a pinch of salt and a dry white wine. They could guess what he was dreaming about. Mrs. DeSoto handed her husband a pole to keep the fox's mouth open. Dr. DeSoto fastened his extractor to the bad tooth. Then he and his wife began turning the winch. Finally, with a sucking sound, the tooth popped out and hung, swaying in the air. I'm bleeding, the fox yelped when he came to. Dr. DeSoto ran up the ladder and stuffed some gauze in the hole. The worst is over, he said. I'll have your new tooth ready tomorrow. Be here at 11 sharp. The fox, still woozy, said goodbye and left. On his way home, he wondered if it would be shabby of him to eat the DeSotos when the job was done. After office hours, Mrs. DeSoto molded a tooth of pure gold and polished it. Raw with salt, indeed, muttered Dr. DeSoto. How foolish to trust a fox. He didn't know what he was saying, said Mrs. DeSoto. Why should he harm us? We're helping him. Because he's a fox, said Dr. DeSoto. They're wicked, wicked creatures. That night, the DeSotos lay awake worrying. Should we let him in tomorrow? Mrs. DeSoto wondered. Once I start a job, said the dentist firmly, I finish it. My father was the same way. But we must do something to protect ourselves, said his wife. They talked and talked until they formed a plan. I think it will work, said Dr. DeSoto. A minute later, he was snoring. The next morning, promptly at 11, a very cheerful fox turned up. He was feeling not a particle of pain. When Dr. DeSoto got into his mouth, he snapped it shut for a moment, then opened it wide and laughed. Just a joke, he chortled. Be serious, said the dentist sharply. We have work to do. His wife was lugging the heavy tooth up the ladder. Oh, I love it, exclaimed the fox. It's just beautiful. Dr. DeSoto set the gold tooth in its socket and hooked it up to the teeth on both sides. The fox caressed the new tooth with his tongue. My, it feels good, he thought. I really shouldn't eat them. On the other hand, how can I resist? We're not finished, said Dr. DeSoto, holding up a large jug. I have here a remarkable preparation developed only recently by my wife and me. With just one application, you can be rid of toothaches forever. How would you like to be the first one to receive this unique treatment? I certainly would, the fox declared. I'd be honored. He hated any kind of personal pain. You will never have to see us again, said Dr. DeSoto. No one will see you again, said the fox to himself. He had definitely made up his mind to eat them with the help of his brand new tooth. Dr. DeSoto stepped into the fox's mouth with a bucket of secret formula and proceeded to paint each tooth. He hummed as he worked. Mrs. DeSoto stood by on the ladder, pointing out spots he had missed. The fox looked very happy. When the dentist was done, he stepped out. Now close your jaws tight, he said, and keep them closed for a full minute. The fox did as he was told. Then he tried to open his mouth, but his teeth were stuck together. Excuse me, I should have mentioned, said Dr. DeSoto. You won't be able to open your mouth for a day or two. The secret formula must first permeate the dentine. But don't worry, no pain ever again. The fox was stunned. He stared at Dr. DeSoto, then at his wife. They smiled and waited. All he could do was say, "Thank you very much," through his clenched teeth, and get up and leave. He tried to do so with dignity. Then he stumbled down the stairs in a daze. Dr. DeSoto and his assistant had outfoxed the fox. They kissed each other and took the rest of the day off. Okay, and the third book that I have today is Winter is Here. Winter isn't quite here, but it's coming very soon. And it's hard to imagine, in a way, that it's coming because we've had such nice warm weather. But that will all change, I'm sure. So the name of the book is Winter is Here, and it's by Kevin Henkes. And it's illustrated by Laura Dronzek. Winter is here. It's everywhere. Children are ice skating and they're sledding and making snowmen. It's falling from the sky, and it's very pretty and white. And it's sitting on the houses. And there's icicles hanging down from the houses and dripping from the roof. And sticking to the trees in clumps and curls. Winter is reaching through the branches and crouching in doorways. And there's like a little bunny rabbit under the snow there. Animals are everywhere and settling here and there softly, so softly. But winter can be hard too. Ice covers the pond. The leaves underneath are like stars in glass. It can take a long time to get ready for winter. Boots and zippers, vests and zippers, and jackets and zippers, and hats, and snaps, and scarves and mittens. Winter is outside, of course, but it's inside too. Feathering the window, dusting the dog, and sitting on the table. Winter comes without a sound, and it comes with many, such as the snowplow and the shovel and the dogs barking. The wind howls in every language, and the windows rattle. Winter is white and gray. But with the dark of night, winter is blue. Blue, blue, deep blue, and even colder. Winter comes, and then it stays, and stays, and stays. And when it's time to leave, winter shrinks away bit by bit. It slows down, getting smaller, drying up, slipping down the street, around the corner, peeking back, then moving on, out into the world, into the air, is spring. So we're just getting started with winter, and I just hope everybody has a wonderful winter and wonderful holidays, and a little snow would be nice just so the children can go out and the adults and play in the snow. So thank you, and I enjoyed reading to you today.